All right, welcome to the Distinctions for Life live broadcast, our live stream, known as Office Hours. And, people, like, one of the things I just did a TikTok today where I said, one of the things you should do while you're all locked up is that you should do experiments. And the live stream is definitely an experiment. All right. And so you're getting to see behind the scenes stuff. And now that we actually know we are, in fact, streaming, that's all good. I am Ron Davis. I'm the host of Distinctions for Life, where I help people get what they really want in life with small changes that make a big difference. And I am helping wannabe entrepreneurs go from having a side thing into having a sustainable business. If you'd like more information on that, you can you can subscribe to the channel. There's a subscribe link below. You can also go to the website, and there's lots of information there as well. Today is a very, well, I was going to say it's a very important, but it is a very important live stream. I do one-on-one mentoring with people, and I always tell my people until about 2 months ago, I would always tell my people I would go and get a mentor if I could find someone that was doing that kind of thing that was further along than me that I could afford. And I got an email from a person that I have known, one of the very first people to ever teach me anything about internet marketing, Jason Van Orden. And he was just at that point opening up a mastermind and doing some one-on-one with people. And I immediately jumped on that opportunity because I believe in mentoring. And Jason is further along. Obviously, if he 10 years ago was teaching me and other people like Pat Flynn how to do internet marketing, he's definitely been around and knows what he's talking about. And so when I started to do these live streams, he was on my list. Actually, I have a Dream 100 list, if anybody knows what that is. And Jason was on that list as well, along with a number of other people. And so today is the opportunity. I'm finally getting the opportunity to have Jason on one of my shows, and in particular, this live stream that we are doing more of during this time when everybody gets to be inside and on the internet. So without further ado, I would like to bring on my mentor, Jason Van Orden, and we'll give this a shot. There we go. All right. So we've got Jason. Ron. Hey, Jason, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Yeah, that's really cool to hear that I was one of the Dream 100. I feel so honored.
Yeah, if you saw who else was on that, you'd be like, whoa.
Nice.
People like, well, Tony Robbins is on there, so that's
I'm sure you'll make it happen.
You never know. It's interesting. I got that idea from Russell Brunson, who got it from a book that a friend of mine actually gifted me recently. And I read at the beginning of the year called The Ultimate Sales Machine. But it's to think up 100 people that you would dream to have promote your product or talk to you or talk about you. Yeah. And so I started making that list, and you were on that list. Yeah, you were definitely on that list.
That's great.
So
yeah, make that list.
Tell the watchers here a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I help people with important ideas, experts in their field, coaches, consultants, authors, speakers, to get their message out there bigger, wider, and create new income streams out of their knowledge too, so they can help more people and grow their income. So I'm all about business strategy for thought leaders. And I do that through online workshops and, like you said, through mentoring and coaching, consulting, those kinds of things, and some digital courses as well to help people establish their platform and have good messaging and positioning so they can get the attention of their audience and grow that audience, and then get new products to market, online courses and things like that. So that's what I do.
And like I said, we met 10 years ago. It was 10 years ago. I can't believe that I've been doing this stuff that long. Mm-hmm. But you'd been doing this kind of stuff before that. You were doing Internet Business Mastery, and you can mention that. But I think before that, you taught podcasting, didn't you?
Yeah, I taught podcasting before Internet Business Mastery. So I got started online. Actually, my original thing I got started online was selling a course for real estate investors that taught them direct marketing so that they could use mail campaigns, physical mail campaigns, to find buyers and sellers for their deals. And that was my first foray into packaging up my own knowledge and having a personal brand. But when podcasting came along, I was just looking for actually new ways to market my real estate investing marketing course. But then podcasting popped up on my radar in 2005. It had only been around just a few months. And I got very, very excited about podcasting. As a marketer, as a bit of an audio geek myself, having been in bands and things like that. And also as just somebody who loves teaching, podcasting seemed very significant to me in 2005. So I dove headlong into that, launched a handful of shows, and started doing consulting for businesses around podcasting. And around that time is also when Internet Business Mastery was born, which is a show that, you mentioned that you listened to, and that very quickly became an educational company with lots of courses to help people get started being an entrepreneur online. And so, I've been doing this a little while, and my brand keeps kind of morphing with what my interests are and who I serve best and what I want to do at the time. But it's always kind of been related to similar things.
Yeah, it's interesting because you did podcasting. I did some podcasting as well, and it's kind of, isn't it interesting kind of to watch this evolution of podcasting? Like, it came out and then it was really hot, and then people kind of forgot about it. And now everybody's like jumping back on the bandwagon like it is like the new thing.
Right. Well, and especially now. I mean, there's always been like these big things that have happened and kind of give it a surge. When Apple finally adopted their directory, and that was huge because now there's a popular way to find podcasts. But that was back in like 2006, right? But definitely with companies like Spotify buying up Gimlet Media, who is a big production company for podcasts, and Spotify is very serious about it, and so that's driven a lot of speculation. In fact, I get a lot of emails now saying, "Can you advise with some investors who are looking into a company and they want to understand the landscape?" And when people start spending big money on something, other people with money start getting curious about it. So podcasting is benefiting from that interest right now.
Yeah. It's also interesting to watch sort of who the big names are. And it has changed. I think it's actually, it's like everything, and YouTube's the same way, where there was a time when you were almost guaranteed that someone would pay attention because there were so few of them.
Right.
Everything goes through that, right? Everything goes through that. And then there's a time, then it gets to where like you have to bring your own listeners to start. And I think that's kind of where it's definitely where YouTube is. And I was advised on that a couple of years ago that the first 1,000 subscribers, you have to bring them. Like, very little is going to be YouTube bringing those people to you. And so I think with podcasting, everybody wants to do it, and they think that, if I'll just start recording stuff and throw it up there, I'll suddenly be as popular as Joe Rogan. Right. Like, first of all, like, there's no overnight success in any of these things, and Joe's been doing it for I don't know how long, right? And now suddenly blows up. But Gimlet's another one. Those guys, they came out of NPR, didn't they?
Yeah, an NPR trained. He was doing Planet Money before, and then had been working he was a producer under This American Life with Ira Glass. Yeah. So people, and that's the thing, is people with some real production skills and background are now in podcasting, and entire companies are formed around building podcasting companies. So that's the other thing, is that as it gets more mainstream, the bar keeps getting raised.
Right.
Well.
Right. Yeah. I remember hearing somebody, I think it was Tim Ferriss, and he was talking about MMA, and there was a similar kind of growth thing with it. It was like, when it first started, and it was UFC, and it was like just this crazy thing that people did. They didn't. I remember the first one coming out; it was just insane. But then there was just sort of this. It went along like that, sort of this underground thing, and then people made some money, and then the big investments came in, and with that came in the quality of the athlete just jumped hugely because everybody's applying all this technology to it. Right. So, what would you say to someone? And this is related to what you're doing now. Who wants to grow that kind of influence, but they're no longer competing with people who are all unknowns, if that makes any sense. They're no longer competing with amateurs in a sense. Like, if you want to start a podcast, you're competing with Gimlet Media, right? You're not just competing with the guy down the street with a mic, right?
Yeah, there is some truth to that, that you're competing against some high production shows, and then at the same time, maybe not. And the answer to that question, I mentioned Spotify. That's actually a pretty good analogy. If we think about how services like Spotify, a music company, have trained us as listeners to be able to find the very specific sound of that maybe even that indie band or that foreign band from another country, whatever, that, and they were really good at even like suggesting stuff to us that we might like. And so in the same way now with online content and things like podcasts, in terms of our interests or things we want help with, or the kind of entertainment we like, if you know very specifically the audience you want to reach, and you create content that's niched down specifically for them, you can still have a healthy audience. And you don't need, I'm sure the most popular shows at Gimlet have hundreds of thousands of listeners, and that's fine. And their model is advertising, so they need a lot of listeners to make the kind of money to what they're doing. But depending on what your goals are, if you get a few thousand people listening to a podcast over time, and it's a very specific audience that well and want to provide value for, you can still over time really stand out, even today. But you do want to meet at least a minimum of production level. But the good news is that it's actually relatively cheap and easy now these days to be able to do that. So yeah, while you might in some ways be competing against some of those, in many ways you're not, as long as you're very specific about who it is you want to reach.
Yeah. And I think that's the key to anything in any kind of populated space. So I think about this when I meet new people who are starting businesses all the time. And the first thing they're like, I'm making this thing that everybody in the world needs. You're like, no, everybody in the world does not need your thing.
Yeah.
But even if everybody in the world needed your thing, you need to be niching down, right? Like you can grow from a niche, but you can't be everything to everybody. It just doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true when you're creating content as well, that you need to niche down. You need to get focused on a particular audience. And the more clear you can get on who that audience is in your mind, the better you will be at creating content for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Which I know is something that you've brought up in our mastermind as well, as getting an understanding of who your audience is very specifically.
Right. And what are their needs? What are their challenges? What are the questions that they're asking? What is it that they're looking for in terms of knowledge or even entertainment? I mean, I'm less familiar with like the comedy podcast industry. So, I don't know what it takes to stand out there. A unique voice of some sort, I suppose. But and then and the third thing, so meeting a minimum level of production, which you can do as long as you really dedicate yourself to learning what it takes, and then being very specific about who your audience is. And then the third thing is, I think it does behoove people to, I always encourage somebody when they're launching a podcast to go and listen to some of the top shows in their particular industry or niche, but then also listen to some popular shows and others, and just kind of see what's working well, and then put together your own kind of flavor of a format. Don't just go and copy wholesale what everyone else is doing, because that's what everyone else is doing. When business podcasts exploded, everyone just started doing like the very same kind of interview show that everyone else was doing. In fact, when business podcasts first started exploding, a lot of them were copying us, like literally to the music, to like the type of intro. Some of them were using our same voiceover artist for their intro. And it's just like, there's no need to copy wholesale what other people are doing. And in fact, now it's just going to be to your detriment. So that's the third thing I throw in there, is just try to be a little bit creative with some aspect of what you're doing. And that starts by getting familiar with what's already out there.
Yeah, that's true. People were actually copying even your voiceover.
Yeah, like you remember a long time ago we had that voiceover. It was like we basically, it was like a movie trailer type thing. It was like, in a world where bosses are, I can't remember. And it was like this whole thing of like, two iconoclasts are showing the way to, I can't remember exactly what the words were, right? And then we suddenly started seeing other shows pop up. They weren't using the same movie trailer sound, but they we must have mentioned, and we were happy to send them business, but like they would use the same voiceover artist, and so a lot of intros started sounding like our intro to our show. So then we changed our intro so that we didn't sound like everybody else.
So did you change things like on a regular basis? Like would you take a time in the year? I know I just changed things on Distinctions for Life's YouTube channel about a month ago, and part of it was the new year, but I was like, no, you need a time. So for me, it was like about every 6 months, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think about my podcast or my YouTube channel and make changes. Did you do that?
It was, and sometimes it was driven by like an example, like I said, where we noticed people were copying us. We're like, okay, well, we're going to change it up now. Sometimes it was, I don't know, maybe for our own, of course you want to be careful about changing something if it feels like it's working, but also, in the fact that I've always been in the business of helping others create content online, it's kind of been something where I like to experiment a lot to see what works well. So then I can teach other people what has worked well for me. So I do like to experiment. And so, I don't know there's a certain timeline for it, but it's usually just if I get a certain idea of like, oh, that would be interesting to try on the show and see how it goes. Like, I think at one point we're like, what if we just, you just kind of like look at your show and like, what are the things we kind of assume that have to be that way? And at one point I remember we're just like, what if we just didn't have intro music? What if we just went right into the content, And so we did that for a while, and actually people kind of liked it because, they at least longtime listeners are just like, boom, you get right to the content. So, just things like that we'd try out when an idea would come to us.
Interesting. Yeah. I've wondered about just going straight into the content with that. Cause I do the sort of teaser, pre-recorded trailer, pre-recorded intro, come out into something where you say something similar every time, which is how I've done every one of my podcasts too, which is, taking something from one field and putting it into another. So that's the way I did podcasting. So now that's the way I'm doing YouTube.
Right.
But you see people make the same mistakes, right? Like that's the thing to avoid is you also see people make the same mistakes. Like one that used to drive me crazy in podcasting was they would put the name of the show as the first thing in the title. So when you look at it on a podcast viewer, all you see is just a list of the name of the show.
And the user experience is totally compromised. It's like, have you tried searching for and subscribing to your own show? Because it's not easy,
Yeah. And I think that got so bad that there was a point where Apple pulled that out. Like they would look at your RSS feed, and if it started with the same thing, they would just pull that thing off of it so they could get the part you actually wanted.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
So that was kind of crazy. So what would be your things that you would tell someone new? They're like, hey, I want to get into this internet thing. And I want to build something there. And I don't even know really what I want to build. But maybe I know that this is more your focus where they already have an idea of what they know. I think a lot of times, actually, if people subscribe to my email list, the first thing I ask them is, what do you really want? Because, and surprisingly, I would say half the people don't know, right? So that's just like, oh, I want to do something, but I don't know what that something is.
Right.
But then the other half are like, I want to do something, and I'm good at playing guitar, so I'm going to play guitar. What would be your advice nowadays for that kind of person?
Yeah, the thing you want to do is you want to find a problem that you can solve. And, a lot of people when they're starting a business or an online business in particular, they think, oh, what's the product I'm going to sell? Or what is the topic that my business is going to, be about? And where you really need to start is who is the audience or the customer that you're going to serve. If you start with that first, then you can derive all the other information that you need. There's an interesting study several years back by CB Insights where they talked to 40 failed startups. In fact, no, it might've been like it was 100 failed startups, and we're looking for like the top reasons that they failed. And the number one reason was that there wasn't a market need for what they were building. Like they'd spent all this time and money building something that people didn't want. And so that's why you want to start with who is the target audience, the target customer, the intended customer that you want to serve with your business, and then go talk to them, figure out, okay, what are their challenges? What are their problems? What's the experiences they're having? Where can I create the greatest value for them? And then use that information to come up with a hypothesis. I mean, we're talking about experiments some today, which I love. Come up with a hypothesis. Okay, now I think I have an idea of something that they could benefit them, and then just figure out how can I get something to market as quickly as possible, some kind of prototype thing to see if it actually does help people and if they're willing to pay for it. It might sound relatively easy, but that's a process a lot of businesses screw up. They fall in love with their idea, their product thing or whatever, and then they get myopic. They get they put the blinders on, and they don't realize that what they're making is just not needed.
Right. So I know we've had this discussion because I felt like it's where I'm at, but what do you do when you want to run an experiment, but you don't have an audience, so you can't run the experiment and to build an audience? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so this is where you really get to pound the pavement and be creative. So I'll just use the example, since I work with a lot of, like I said, thought leader types where their knowledge is their product. And a lot of them have hit a point where coaching or consulting or speaking is kind of maxed out because they only have so much time to exchange for money. So now they're looking for more scalable ways. So often they're coming to me to help them create an online course. And I tell them, like, okay, great, we're going to go talk to your audience. We're going to figure out what the problem or that course is going to sell. And then if they don't already have an audience, then what we end up doing is I end up having them create some kind of really valuable piece of content. And they go to their network. It's basically you start using 6 degrees to find people. And really it's only 2 degrees to find people for your like prototype course that I have them run. It's like, look, we just need to find 5 or 6 people that can come and go through this course for the first time. So that's where again, if you know clearly who it is you're trying to reach, you start reaching out to people in your network. You start thinking of anybody you might know. Maybe you start doing some searches and reaching out to people on LinkedIn. I mean, that's where early on, sometimes you do have to scrape and, to find those first few customers and then get some, prove your product, get some testimonials. But, things can start snowballing from there. So, or you go where the people are already hanging out. So if you know what problem you're solving, great, go find the Facebook groups or the LinkedIn groups or the Reddit, the subreddits or whatever, where those kinds of people are hanging out, and do some outreach or post some valuable content and get some attention, again, to try to find even just a few people will pay you a little bit for this thing that you're creating. But early on, it does take some pounding the pavement to make it happen. It's not going to be just put a course online and people will start showing up and buying it.
Right. That's the big fallacy that if you build it, they will come.
Right.
Just because you did.
Right.
And yeah. So you shouldn't say so. Anyway.
What's that?
Oh, it's a Toastmaster thing, right? Like I don't know if you know anything about Toastmasters, but they teach public speaking, and you actually have someone in every meeting that's listening for ums and ahs. And they're also listening for connector words, including and, but, so.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much you use those words and you don't even realize you're doing it.
Oh, yeah. When I listen back to my podcast, I still, even after 15 years of podcasting, and I go through waves. Sometimes I train myself out of it really well, but I've been on a podcast hiatus for a few years. And so as I've picked my podcasting and doing interviews back up again, I've had to catch myself saying,
right.
Well, so, yeah, totally.
A big part of those happening is because you're thinking.
Yeah.
And if once you know what your content is, you know what you're going to say, you don't necessarily use those. But when you have to think about
it's okay to pause and think.
Yes.
And
there's
not feel
that
the silence too. So it's both of those things. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny. I've watched people in Toastmasters go through this progression. So they start out and they're and they're on all the time. Like every sentence is punctuated with those words. And then they get that and they start pausing. So then every sentence has these really long pauses after, but that's an improvement. That's a huge improvement.
Right. Yeah.
Once you start hearing ums and ahs, like when you go hear other people speak, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this guy. It's crazy.
Right.
That's one of the downsides. I don't know if you call it the downside, whatever. One of the detriments of learning something like that is that once you've learned it, you can't not hear it. You can't not see it. And so there's that.
Totally.
All right. So once a person has an idea of who their people are, and they have an idea of their problem, and they feel like they've got a solution for it, what's the next step?
Yeah. So, I mean, you try to prototype it as quickly as possible. Now, if that's in a physical product realm, that's not as much my expertise, right? I know there are ways to prototype physical products. Again, I deal mostly in the realm of like digital knowledge and courses and online programs. And so I typically, what I have somebody do who's, say, I'll just give you an example. I have a client who goes into corporations and does like leadership workshops or communication workshops or teamwork workshops, right? But they wanted to now create a new income stream that wasn't dependent on them having to show up and teach the thing. And so we started packaging up their knowledge and putting it online as a series of videos that people could buy and instantly get access to. But before we did that, we went and found them a dozen people to sign up for just a series of phone calls using, we use Zoom in that case, but just something where there's kind of a video call, right? And so we did over 4 weeks, 4 calls, and each call was a specific topic. And so they were testing out material. They were seeing, getting feedback from people at the same time. At the end, they got some testimonials about how the information helped people. And so then we were able to take what we had learned, the feedback we'd gotten. They even got people to pay a little bit for that as well, and then create kind of the more produced version of the product. And so now they do have a fully videoed and ready to go product that, in fact, they were able to sell multiple seats to one company even just a couple of weeks ago now, because so they didn't have to go to the company to present. That company was like, oh, cool, you've got this communications course. Awesome. I'd like to buy, so many seats of it. And so it was a nice, bulk buy of digital content that they made once and is now a new income stream for them. So you kind of go through an iterative process like that. You do some kind of prototype, and then eventually you get into kind of more of a production version of your product. And then at that point, that's when you really get to go into like lead generation mode and start doing good old marketing to get more people to buy your thing. But that's kind of the first phase of it, and you go through that as quickly as possible, just so you have a winning product and that people are willing to pay for it, and that you've kind of refined according to your hypothesis what that product needs to be, such that now you can go to market and invest time in marketing, feeling good that it's like you've got something that people actually want.
Yeah. And that's an interesting approach, because I actually, in a recent video, was talking about how there's this internet marketing idea that I'll sell a course and then I'll make it. And the problem with that is when the people get to the course, it's, as my friend Aaron put it, it's a pile of crap. So it is a pile of just stuff that they're shoving into some LMS at the end. And the internet, I think the internet marketing crowd is the worst about this, because they're so focused on the marketing, right? That they don't think about the delivery.
I totally agree. And that's an entirely other problem. You're right. There's some really good marketers out there who are horrible teachers and don't put any effort into the other side of things. And that's too bad. It's like 80-20 when it should be 20-80 or something, right?
Yeah.
Or even 50-50, something more reasonable. Absolutely. I don't think that's a prototyping problem. I just think that's an ethics problem, what it is, right?
Yeah.
But there are definitely ways to sell the thing first, to have a good enough idea of what it is, to know, where it's going and what you need to be able to tell people enough of what you're going to give them in each of those calls, and so that they know what they're buying into and investing in. And then you proceed to deliver some exceptional value through good planning and delivery of the knowledge. But
and I mean, what you're talking about is much more a prototype first, where you are selling something right off the bat to your own network, but you're not selling this as almost as the final product, in a sense, right? Like you're like, here's the information, and this is we're going to work through this and figure out exactly what's good and not good. And I'm probably going to spend more time with you than I would later on, right? When you hit the ultimate goal, you're not necessarily refining as much
Right.
as you are in this first prototype sort of thing. Whereas I think there's two things that I see those kind of people do wrong. One is they're not prototyping. They're like, I'm going to come up with something that people will buy, and then I will figure out how to teach it.
Yeah.
And then that's one thing. The other thing I think that people often do in that situation that also makes this a big pile of crap is, in a way, they're trying, well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt, and they're trying to over deliver. Let's not say that they just knew that they needed to add bonuses to their content, but they're trying to over deliver. And so they just shove every recording of everything they've ever done into their product.
Right.
And what happens is the user gets in there, and not only is there sort of a lackluster product that teaches the thing they bought, but then there's like 100 other things that they could be doing, right?
Right.
And it just ends up being a mess.
Overwhelm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Overwhelm's a real problem, and I've learned that the hard way. I've certainly in the past made courses where I realized in the end it was far too overwhelming. Either just too much information or not well enough organized. And so, I've learned over time how to hopefully not do that as much. But you're right. Yeah, it's a problem with a lot of people learning a lot about marketing and sales and not learning enough about education. And that's the good news is I think a lot of people that are going online looking for knowledge now are getting savvier about and more selective about who they buy from. Unfortunately, there will always be people who are just really good marketers and people who will just respond to that very enticing marketing no matter what's being sold. That's just the sad truth. But I do think there are a lot more people focusing on the quality and the experience because they genuinely want to get people results, and also because the consumer is getting more aware of what they need in order to get results through an online learning experience. And so they know to look for those things.
Yeah. And I would say, I don't have regrets, or I try not to have regrets, but one of the things that I think about in our current situation, which of course we can't have a live stream broadcast without mentioning our current situation, is that I didn't have something ready. Because if I had a course right now, I feel that there's suddenly a huge market. And there is, in fact, suddenly a huge market, not just because people are losing their jobs, but because everybody is at home learning online.
Thrown into virtual. Absolutely. So it's created an opportunity. And you know what? That's okay. You didn't have something ready, because we're going to get you to prototyping something ASAP.
Yes.
So you can still take advantage of this. Well, I want to be careful about how I say that. It's not about taking advantage of the opportunity, but tap into an opportunity while also delivering. I mean, they're out there looking now.
Yeah.
Like they need to fill their time. They're maybe looking to brush up their career skills or make their business more resilient for the next time, or for when things start coming, right? So, again, that's looking for a problem you can solve. And of course you need to, hopefully it goes without saying, I know it does for you, but like to anyone listening, it's like, make sure it's a problem you actually can solve. Don't go, that's what we're talking about, right? People go and make a course, like you say, they find a problem, they market to it, and then they think they'll go and try to figure out how to help with it. But there is an opportunity right now because of that.
Yeah. And everybody's learning the tools as well.
Right.
I was talking to a friend of mine, and his wife does this thing called BSF. It's Bible Study Fellowship. And it's basically, and I'm going to be a little un-PC here, it's a bunch of old people who have a Bible study on Tuesday nights. So they go to a church and they have this study with like 10 or 12 people. Well, they can't do that. So now you've got a bunch of, but they adapted, right? And they said, well, we're gonna do this virtually via Zoom. And they figured it out. And so now all of these people in their 60s and 70s have Zoom installed on their machine and understand how to join a meeting. And that's all you need to know, really, to do a lot of the stuff that, what you do in the group I'm in, the kind of stuff I do. Even when I'm doing one-on-one now, I'm often doing it via Zoom, even though most of my mentees are right here in Abilene. Right. So people are going to have some of the technical hurdles that we previously would have had to get people over they're going to have gotten themselves over it. Yeah,
the learning curve just accelerated, and that's when technology, or it goes into more of the mainstream, which is happening with online education for sure. I mean, online education is not new. It's been around. Like I said, I did course 15 years ago online, but sometimes it still takes a long time. And there's some people who don't even realize podcasting existed beyond 2 years ago, right? Well, I started the podcast 15 years ago. Yeah. So, but yeah, those things get just either a current event or a change in tech or whatever, and something gets thrown into the spotlight or that curve gets accelerated. And so that creates opportunity.
Yeah. It's I got an email newsletter from actually, I think that was from Stack Overflow, but it had an article I didn't read the article, but I read the title, and it said going fully remote. And I wasn't thinking of it as an individual thing. I was thinking of it, we basically just did that to the entire American workforce.
Right.
Like to everybody who could possibly work remote, we just made it a law.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't make it a law. We just made it a decree from on high. And our entire workforce, anybody who can go remote is now remote. Mm-hmm. And that will have long-term implications.
Absolutely.
For how society does going forward.
I think so too.
So Jason, we've been on about 35 minutes, and I don't know how long this thing's going to be, but I'm thinking it's going to be 30 to 45 minutes. And this is one of the things that podcasting had over television or radio, right? Was we didn't have any rules on how long we had to be. And I don't think I really wanted it to go too long. I don't think I wanted to go an hour. I did an hour last week, and that was pretty long. And so, I think we'll start wrapping things up here. If people want to know more about you, obviously there is a URL below. But what else would?
Oh, sorry. Was that? Yeah, it just glitched on me a little bit. But so, what else can they should go to jasonvanorden.com, which is on the screen. That's great. And a couple of things I'd encourage them to try to check out is either sign up for my email newsletter. That's where all my latest content comes out, is through the email newsletter. And you can also click, if you like, watching and listening to media like this, you click on the podcast link, and I've got a new podcast called Impact. And every episode, I just go through specific action steps you can take in order to build this kind of thought leadership brand and business online. There's great stuff about marketing and messaging. The newest episode I just put out actually talks about 4 steps to putting together an online course, kind of like we've touched on a little bit today. It'll go more deeper into what that looks like. So those are a couple of things I'd mention for people to check out. jasonvanorden.com, sign up for the newsletter, check out the podcast.
All right. Well, thank you again, Jason, for being on the show. And everybody, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Distinctions for Life podcast. It's not a podcast. Man, it
could be a podcast.
It could be a podcast. And people tell me, Ron, make it into a podcast. And then they tell me, Ron, don't start a podcast. We've had both of those discussions. And it may be sometime. Actually, I like the live stream stuff. It's fun in a way that I didn't expect it to be.
Right.
And so, so check out the Distinctions for Life YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you're watching this on Facebook, you can like my Facebook page. If you're watching it on YouTube, definitely subscribe to the channel below. There's a subscribe button. Go check out some of the older videos. If you haven't ever looked at any Distinctions for Life video, I would suggest you start with the Money Flow Framework. And you can find that. It's a playlist on YouTube, and it'll kind of give you an overview of my thoughts on how money flows from your customer's wallet to your wallet, with some important distinctions in there that a lot of people miss. And there's a very important reason I say flows into your wallet and not into your business, because there is a difference. And thank you for watching today, all of you who have come and gone. And those of you who watch this in the future, I hope you get something out of it and go check out Jason's stuff. Goodbye. Yeah.